Welcome into the Lucas and Lucas podcast alongside Lucas Frankel. As always, I'm Mike Lucas. The Nets-Bucks game 6 is tonight, but before we preview that, we have to talk about the complete meltdown that happened in Philadelphia. Now, full disclosure, I was at work last night writing some scripts, editing video. I had the game on the TV in the corner of the sports office, was watching while I was working, and Philadelphia was cruising through the first half. And then I left work, I went home, checked the box score, and it was a 24-point game, 22-point game in the third quarter. I had to wake up early this morning. I said, okay, I'm missing nothing. I'm going to bed. I wake up this morning, and my, oh my, did I miss the comeback of a century or the collapse of a century, Frankel. I'm not quite sure which one is more apropos. So in your mind, Frank, do the Hawks get credit? Do the Sixers get the blame? And is it more on Doc Rivers, or is it more on the players and one guy in specific?
Well, speaking of Doc Rivers, the stat is, I don't know Doc Rivers philosophy enough to say that this is 100% his fault. All I know is that the numbers sort of speak for themselves. Here over the last two seasons, Doc Rivers coach teams are 11-5 when getting a lead of at least 16 points in the postseason. The rest of the NBA, all the other teams, all the other games over the past 2 years, teams are 76-3. So Doc Rivers is 11-5. The rest of the NBA as a whole in the postseason the last 2 years is 76-3. Make of that what you want. But it is a little difficult for me to put 100% of the blame here on Doc Rivers when you have Joel over the last two fourth quarters. Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Tobias Harris make a combined one field goal in the last two fourth quarters in games 4 and 5. I mean that is incomprehensible. Tobias Harris had just 4 points. I mean that is a complete no-show. But the biggest culprit here, hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, is Ben Simmons. He had 8 points, only took 4 shots the whole game. He was 4 of 14 from the line, the first guard in league history to miss 10 free throws in a playoff game. This was a former number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. This dude has all the tools to be not a good, an unbelievable, all-time Hall of Fame level caliber player. And listen, I haven't watched every single one of his games, but I watched a decent amount of Ben Simmons. I don't think he's improved one iota in a single area since he came into the league. How are you that talented? How do you have that much skill and you can't shoot? You can't shoot. How does that happen? You can't shoot a free throw. You're a better free throw shooter than he is. I'm a better free throw shooter than he is. Ben Simmons has all the talent in the world. Does he not practice? We see him shooting all the time in over the offseason. If this dude doesn't spend 20 hours a day during the offseason, I still can't picture the Sixers losing this series. I think they're going to win game 6, and I think they're moving on. I can't envision a scenario where they don't win this series because here's the reality of this series, and I know I'm going a long time here. The Sixers dominated the second half of game 1, dominated games 2 and 3, dominated the first 3 quarters of game 4, absolutely annihilated the Hawks in the first 3 quarters of game 5. The Sixers have been the astronomically better team for 85% of this series, and yet they trail 3 games to do. That is just absolutely inexcusable. But I refuse to believe the Sixers are losing this series. I can't wrap my head around it. They're so much better than the Hawks. I can't believe it.
Well, one of those 76-3 games, by the way, was game 5 of Brooklyn when Milwaukee blew that lead. So we have seen it recently. As to your point about Simmons, we don't know if he's improved because he refuses to show us if he can or cannot do the things that we weren't sure if he was capable of doing. Ben Simmons in his rookie season versus Ben Simmons now does the exact same thing, and you don't see the next evolution of his game. Think about Julius Randle, for example, the most improved player in the league this year, second-team All-NBA. When he came into the league, he wasn't a shooter. He especially wasn't a three-point shooter, and he did not have any type of dribble pull-up game in his arsenal. He worked on it. We saw a little bit in New Orleans. We saw a little bit more as he progressed through the next chapter of his career, and we saw the culmination of hard work this summer or this season when he was a 24, 25-point game scorer and at times was carrying the Knicks offense on his back with moves that he wouldn't even attempted in his first 2 years in the league, his first 3 years in the league. Simmons hasn't shown us that he's confident enough in what he has to even try some of these new things. He might be a decent three-point shooter, and he's terrified to shoot. Free throws are inexcusable. And there's one exception with free throws that I will actually believe. Sometimes your hands are too big to shoot a basketball. Shaq has talked about the ball, and it's like shooting a tennis ball, Frank. Imagine trying to shoot a tennis ball.
I shoot tennis balls all the time. I have no issue shooting a tennis ball. Zero.
On a 10-foot free throw, shoot a tennis ball, and that's the equivalent of what some of these guys have with big hands. Now, on the contrary, Kawhi Leonard has the biggest hands in the NBA, and he's a pretty good free throw shooter. So it's the one.
Don't even think about giving the hand excuse for Ben Simmons.
I'm just saying that is the one free throw excuse that I think does play a factor in some of this. But free throws are free shots, and it's mental more than it is physical. It's a mental thing. And Ben Simmons, Giannis, and guys who really struggle to shoot free throws, it's not because they can't make a wide open, standing still 12-foot shot. It's because mentally they're not ready to step up and make it. They're terrified of the result of missing and then getting ridiculed online, because at this point they know that's what happens. Ben Simmons goes 4 for 14 from the foul line. You go on Twitter, every joke humanly possible has been made. Giannis misses a free throw and it's, oh, he's not clutch, he can't do this. You get in your head and you're so scared to fail that you can't succeed. And free throws, more than any other part of basketball, is purely mental, because there's no defense. It is you, the rim, and it's a 12-foot shot. If you're in the NBA, that should be cake. I don't understand how some NBA players shoot below 70% ever, because they practice free throws, and it's something that should be easily replicable or easily replicated. Is a simple motion, step, shoot from 12 feet. It's not very difficult, Frank. And the fact that Simmons, who's so good with the ball in his hands, can't consistently replicate a free throw is a disgrace to – it's almost a disgrace on him, because we haven't, like, how do you not get better? You're right. How do you not get better? But I think as far as shooting and some other things in his game, he may be better than he was 4 years ago, 5 years ago when he came into the league. He's just too scared to put what he works on in practice into a game situation. And that would be more frustrating than anything else as a Sixers fan.
You mentioned Julius Randle. So the other comp there is Brook Lopez, who with the Nets was a complete interior player. Didn't spend a single second of his time outside the paint. And now with the Bucks, the only offense he generates is from three. That's all he does. So if Brook freaking Lopez can develop an outside shot, there is no excuse for Ben Simmons not to develop an outside shot. And the whole hand size thing, I mean, give me a break. I don't want to hear that. That is not an excuse.
I'm not saying that's the Simmons excuse. I'm just saying that's the one free throw excuse that I do think at sometimes is valid. With Brook Lopez, though, Frank, he always had decent touch. He just wasn't asked to shoot threes in New Jersey and Brooklyn. He was an inside scorer. In Milwaukee, he's asked to shoot threes. I think Philadelphia at some point has to demand Ben Simmons to shoot. Demand it. And build his confidence up that way. Because at this point, his confidence, I think I'm a more confident shooter than Ben Simmons is. I think you're a more confident shooter than Ben Simmons is at this point. And shooting, especially free throw shooting, is so mental. That's why Joe Harris right now needs to see a shot or two go in early in game 6, because he's in his own head right now. It's not like Joe Harris forgot how to shoot. Joe Harris knows how to shoot. It's just mental. You got to feel good about it. And Simmons, for whatever reason, probably because of Twitter, and that's one of the downsides of social media now, isn't confident in his ability to put the ball into the basket from anywhere outside of 4 or 5 feet. He has to, 76ers have to put him in position to build that confidence. At the end of the day, that's the bottom line.
I mean, I don't know Ben Simmons. Obviously, I don't know him personally. I've never talked to the guy. The only thing I can think of is work ethic. He's not putting in the work to get better. That's the only thing I can think of. When you are that talented, when you have that much God-given ability, and you can't shoot a basketball, man, look at yourself in the mirror and figure it the hell out. Because if I had that much talent and I was 6'10" and I had all the gifts necessary to be one of the world's greatest basketball players, you better believe I'll learn how to shoot a freaking basketball. Ben Simmons, what the hell are you doing? Is he trying? Does he care? I mean,
here's the funny part too. I talk about confidence, right? You need confidence. Well, Simmons dated Jenner. He dated Kendall Jenner. Do you know how much confidence you have to have in yourself to put yourself out to the world and date a Jenner? Like, his confidence outside of basketball is clearly there. He needs to bring that same swag and ego onto the court to hopefully help him out with whatever struggles he's having offensively, because Philadelphia needs him. I mean, Atlanta can score. Flat out, Atlanta can score. And if Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons are going to combine for 12 points, you're not going to win that game. even though Seth Curry had 36. Steph Curry.
Man, if Seth Curry's going to score 36 points, you can't lose because he's not doing that again. Then obviously Tobias Harris did nothing and Ben Simmons did nothing. But either way, a couple of notes on this game. Third largest blown lead in playoff team over the last 25 seasons. Largest playoff blown lead in 76ers history. Largest comeback in Hawks history. At one point in the third quarter, they were plus 3,500 on the live line, 35-1, and they came back and got the victory. Before we wrap up our Sixers-Hawks talk, Mike, do you believe the Hawks will win the series?
So I thought betting Atlanta before the series started was a good move because I thought Atlanta had the ability to beat the Sixers if Joel Embiid wasn't healthy. Joel Embiid has proven to be healthy, and Atlanta is still finding ways to win this game. I think if it goes 7, I don't think they can win game 7 in Philly. I still am going to pick Philly to end up winning the last 2 games and come out of this series, but it would not shock me in one bit if Atlanta closes this out in game 6. It would not shock me one bit.
I mean, this postseason, as we've seen with Chris Paul getting COVID, with Kawhi Leonard having a mysterious ACL injury the Clippers aren't revealing, with everything that's sort of, I mean, like every time Kyrie's ankle, it's Anthony Davis. It's just, this has been the most swings and turns, and it's been a roller coaster ride because obviously the Clippers won yesterday. We'll get to that in a second, but you hear Kawhi Leonard's out, you're like, all right, write off the Clippers immediately. So it's so hard to keep track of. I can't foresee a scenario where the Sixers don't advance. But if they do lose in game 6 or do lose in game 7, there is no chance in hell Ben Simmons is back on the Sixers next year. I know there's rumblings about Zion Wilson being unhappy in New Orleans. If you could center a package around Ben Simmons and include maybe some other pieces and find a way to get Zion Williamson to team up with Embiid. Again, I guess they're similar players, but you got to mix it up there. And I think
Zion and Ben Simmons have the exact same skill set. One just plays power forward, one just plays point guard.
But if you're Philly, you got that just immediately came to me with hearing the reports of Zion being unhappy and Ben Simmons just needing a change of scenery. At least, I don't know, something that was the first thing that came to my mind. If the two sides could figure out a way to make it work, because the Pelicans would be hard pressed to find a more talented option on the market than Ben Simmons, and that would be a hell of a. But despite all his loss, either way, let's just talk about the Game 5 win for the Nets real quick. I could have ran a marathon in that fourth quarter. I was so jacked up. I've never seen or been anything like it. Most points in the playoff game in team history for the Nets. 49 points, 17 rebounds, 10 assists. He played all 48 minutes, did not sit a single second of the game. First player in NBA history to score 45 points at 15 plus rebounds, 10 plus assists in a playoff game. He shot nearly 70% from the field. I mean, the other two things were James Harden played 46 minutes when it looked like he was never going to be back for this series. 46 minutes, 1 of 10 from the field. Man, I mean, Mike, was that the best Nets playoff game ever? Obviously, up until then, that was the best playoff game we've seen from the Nets. Most exciting.
No, it was unreal. I went through every gauntlet, every emotion in the gauntlet during that game. They were down early. I was mad. James Harden couldn't move. I was disappointed. They're down 18. I was like, this is over. Then Uncle Jeff comes in and turns into Steph Curry. And I was like, oh, maybe there's a chance. Then Milwaukee answers with another uppercut. And it's just deflating. And then the third quarter rolls around and Kevin Durant goes supernova. And when Kevin Durant goes supernova, you always have a chance. So I kept getting, hey, this isn't over yet. Like, they're still hanging around. They're still hanging around. I texted you before the Shamet shot saying they get this to single digits. Milwaukee's going to choke. Shamet hits the corner 3 to make it a 9-point game. And next thing you know, the floodgates are open. I had more people text me after that game than I think I've had after any sports game or sports moment in my entire life. The only thing comparable was the Daniel Jones pick, because I was very adamant about not picking him at 6, and the Giants obviously did that. But it was awesome. And the fact that the Nets are finding a way to win when they're 48% healthy is remarkable, because I think Milwaukee is a really talented basketball team. I think they're coached horribly, but they are a very talented basketball team. Harden, who played 46 minutes, do you think he ever crossed a 55% effort threshold?
I mean, this wasn't a lack of effort. That was
no. Not effort as in like he wasn't trying, but he never
pushed himself to like
really. That's a better word. Like, he never sprinted.
He didn't drive a single time. I mean, he had like one like mini drive when he had like a floater and got a bucket plus the foul, but he was not driving past anybody. He was hovering at the 3-point line of midcourt the entire time. He was being. I mean, listen, James Harden is. I mean, listen. I think he has the second highest basketball IQ of any player in the league. Number 1 is LeBron James. Number 2 is James Harden. In terms of pure basketball IQ and understanding what's in front of him and how to dissect the defense and how to just make the right move. I know he makes some boneheaded plays at times, but I think he's one of the smartest players in the entire league, and he knew where his body was at in Game 5, and he completely knew what he could do, what he couldn't do, and he did everything he had to do to play 46 minutes, and that was not playing a reckless style basketball where he's driving and kicking out and doing all this crazy stuff that we're so used to seeing James Harden do. He was he was playing like immobile quarterback, just literally just standing around and then making the passes that Mike James and Tyler Johnson, Steve Nash didn't trust to make. The most interesting thing about this game was the rotation. Nick Claxton and Mike James only played a combined 5 minutes. I mean, Nick Claxton.
Durant never came out.
I mean, it was Steve Nash just like saying, you know what, I don't trust anyone. If we're going down here, we're going down with our best pitch, with our best guys, and if we lose this game, screw it. And I love the approach.
I do. Let me chime in real quick with that. Harden didn't play a good game. Like, statistically was horrible. Defensively, he had to stop on Giannis late, but it's not like he played a great game. The thing that was different at the end of Game 4 without Kyrie in Game 5 was Kevin Durant had confidence in Harden to be able to make a play. And Harden made some beautiful passes late. The backdoor cut to Joe Harris. He had the hit Blake Griffin wide open for 3. Also, Jeff Green, shout out Jeff Green for 7 threes. I mean, if he doesn't go 5 for 5 in the first half, this game gets out of hand and the Nets never are in a position to come back. But Harden's ability just to set up the offense, and even at 50%, his ability to mosey around and just make sure Durant got the ball in a better spot where he had to take 1 dribble in the post against PJ Tucker instead of 2 makes all the difference. Mike James can't do that. Mike James is a perfect guy to come off the bench and score a little bit. He's not the facilitator. The Nets don't have a true point guard on this roster outside of James Harden, and James Harden is very loosely associated to being a true point guard. But the Nets don't win that game without James Harden, and he did not play well. I'm terrified of what he looks like in Game 6. I'm not sure how that hamstring is going to feel after playing 46 minutes.
Well, he didn't push himself. He didn't really exert himself at all.
Yeah, but at the same time, hamstrings, with strained hamstring, you could move around on it. It's when you have to cut and stop and sprint is when you're at risk of hurting it again, which is why I think he played so much. I think if he sat down, the hamstring tightens up, he can't come back in. I'm not a doctor. That's just normal common sense. I'm scared of how he looks in Game 6, and I will admit, Frank, I fully expect Milwaukee to come out and lay a smackdown tonight.
Listen,
I fully expect
and everything is lining up for that. The Vegas line tells you that it's at last check, it's Bucks -6. This is a case of Milwaukee goes home. The Nets just coming off this emotional win where they basically went all in. Just be like, screw it. We don't really care about this game when we turn our attention to Game 7. But here's what I mean. If going to my head, the Bucks win tonight. Going to my head, I don't see a scenario where the Nets are able to win tonight. But on the positive side, the Bucks are rattled. They feel like they had this series won in Game 5 and they let it slip away. And now the Nets with Kevin Durant, the assassin, he's got to score 50 again. He's gonna have to have a similar performance tonight if the Nets are gonna win. But you have Kevin Durant, who's just cold-blooded, doesn't care. He wants to go out there and he wants to cut your head off, basically. Not actually cut your head off, but he wants to go out there and he wants to end their season. So there is a part of me that if the Nets they smell blood in the water, they sense that this team can just be hit in the face, and if they go out there and they punch them in the mouth early and get a lead, the Bucks will roll over and the Nets will win tonight. But it's just so hard for me to see, and I really want it to end in Game 6 because then the whole pressure of Game 7, and then I have to work on Saturday night and having to sit there and just be in there and having to remain calm and have my composure while the Nets are playing a winner-take-all game is not something that I'm prepared to handle. But go out there, punch him in the mouth, get a lead early, demoralize the Bucks, and end this tonight. I want this over in Game 6, so that way you have a whole week basically to rest Kyrie, to rest Harden's hamstring, and get ready for the Eastern Conference Finals against, God forbid, the freaking 76ers. And let's freaking go.
I completely agree. You go out in the first quarter, guns blazing, and then if it doesn't go your way and you're down 18-19 again in the third quarter, you can slowly pull the dogs off and rest up for Game 7. But I do agree. I think Milwaukee shook. It's hard to come back after a loss like that. It's hard to come back after a loss like that knowing you did not attack James Harden, knowing Kyrie Irving wasn't playing, knowing Joe Harris still can't make a three, knowing Kevin Durant torched you in one of the greatest performances ever. It is tough to come back from that because Milwaukee still had a chance to win late. Now you look at Game 3, the Nets should have won Game 3. Milwaukee should have won Game 5. It all evens out here. But at the same time, I don't want Kevin Durant playing 48 minutes again unless it's a guaranteed win. Because at some point, he needs his legs, and at some point those minutes are going to catch up to him, and we have a Game 7 on the horizon if tonight doesn't go well. So I would like Steve Nash to be just cautiously optimistic, and if it's not in the cards tonight, don't push it. I also want to see Joe Harris get about 15 design plays for him to try and find his shot again. And especially if the game's not going well and you pull the guys late, leave Harris in and let him run off double screens every time and just try to get his confidence back. Because I do think at the end of the day, Joe Harris is a crucial part of this Nets offense, and they are so much better when he's making shots that he should make. And right now he can't buy a bucket if it was on sale at the dollar store. They need to get Joe Harris involved, and they need Joe Harris to make shots.
The formula is so simple for the Bucks. Just if James Harden's on the court, whoever's guarding him, just attack the crap out of him. Just attack the crap out of him. It's so simple. It's like the fact that I can think about it is it's a very scary thought because it's so easy how they can just exploit the Nets. And Giannis talked about that. He talked about we need to attack Harden and whoever he's guarding. That's why I love when PJ Tucker's out there because the Nets can just stick Harden on PJ Tucker and PJ Tucker's not going to do anything. So that's one of the things I'm most interested to see is how much run does PJ Tucker get? Because after the Game 5, one of the biggest questions that the media pressed Giannis on was, why don't you guard Kevin Durant? And if I were Budenholzer and listen, I'm not a basketball coach. I don't know like the X's and O's and all this stuff, but like I guess maybe they're afraid to put Giannis on Durant because they don't want him exerting too much energy on the defensive end of the floor, and that we can conserve it for offense. But man, I would put Giannis on KD. I would exploit the hell out of James Harden. And I don't think the Nets have an answer for that defensively. It feels like such a simple formula for the Bucks to do this. But then again, it's been so simple for them all series. And best case scenario for the Nets is Giannis hits a couple early jump shots and starts like feeling himself, and he keeps shooting the rest of the game. Because the more outside jump shots he takes, the better off the Nets will be. And if he's feeling himself early, let him keep shooting because that is a recipe for failure for the Bucks. Let Giannis shoot let him take 50 shots from the 3-point line in mid-range. Because he can't shoot.
If PJ Tucker's on the court, the only reason he's out there is to guard Durant. So that's why Giannis.
And he can't guard Durant. This whole notion that PJ Tucker's on Durant stopper is a joke.
Listen, I'm just saying the only reason he's out there is to in theory, guard Kevin Durant. When he's not, Giannis goes out there. And I think one of the reasons and one of the misconceptions, good offense beats good defense no matter what. Kevin Durant with Giannis on him is still going to put up 35, 40 points. So in theory, your mindset is, all right, put Giannis on someone else. They can't score. Durant, we can't stop anyway. So, yeah, but at the same time, especially late in games, I think Giannis does give you the best chance to slow down someone like Kevin Durant, who is just incredible.
A couple other notes from the series. Nets are 3-0 when the games are played on TNT, 0-2 when they are played on the ESPN family of networks. And listen, Mike Breen's one of the great announcers. I truly believe, and he'll completely refute this if he ever hears it, that he is rooting for the Bucks to win the series. That dude has Knicks blood running through his veins, and the way he called the games 3 and 4 in Milwaukee. I mean, I don't know if he's just excited to be back in where there's a crowd and he's just feeding off the crowd, but man, he is rooting. It feels like he is rooting. So listen, I don't usually like notice these things or like blame announcers for kind of stuff, but Mike Green is 100% rooting for the Bucks in this series, and because he doesn't want this turning into a Nets down. He's a Knicks guy. He's the Knicks play-by-play guy, and I just feel him. Watch the game tonight. He will be louder and more excited when the Bucks do something than when the Nets do something. That's just a straight up fact. And you watch the game and you'll see it for yourself. And what in terms of what happens tonight. It's so hard. I mean, I can't see a scenario where the Bucks don't win tonight. I think this is going to Game 7, and I really, really hope I'm wrong.
I unfortunately concur. I would like to see the Nets shoot 53s, and I want Joe Harris to get 30. If they lose, Joe Harris has to find his jump shot. There has to be the silver lining that Joe Harris finds his jump shot.
Joe Harris. I mean, he's got to have one game here this series where he like resembles himself. He's got to have it one time. Just go out there and like score 25 points. If Joe Harris gets over 20 points, then that's win this game. If Joe Harris scores over 20 points, the Nets will win this game and win this series tonight. Bottom line, straight up, end of story. Obviously, I'm on the back of my mind, I'll always be terrified that James Harden comes up limp and gets taken out. That is also one of my biggest fears. Moving on to let's go to Jets Clippers real quick. Mike, I knew at halftime. I don't know if you watched this game at all. It sounds like you didn't because you went to bed. But the Jazz hit 17 3-pointers in the first half. 17 3-pointers, and they only led by 5 at halftime. If you hit 17 threes, you better be up by like 25, 30 points. The fact that you're only on 5, and you may as well just end the game at halftime. There was no way the Jazz were winning that game after only leading by 5 points when hitting 17 threes in a half. Like the Nets had like a record for team history with 20 in a game. The Jazz had 17 and a half and only led by 5 points.
That's actually, I had no idea that I only saw the score. I haven't seen any highlight. That's absurd. That's unfair. It's 51 points from 3 in the first half.
Yeah, and they led by 5 points at halftime on 17 threes.
I'm speechless. I had to wake up at 6 a.m. this morning, so that's why I went to bed early last night.
Yeah.
I know it's not a video podcast. I guess it's video podcast too, but like, I have no idea how you lose. How many threes they end up with in the game?
Let me just double check that number very quickly.
17 in the first half. I'm going to guess 8 in the second.
They only hit 3 threes in the second half.
So finish with 23. Like if you make 23s in a game, odds are you will win. So whatever.
They were like, I guess, so they were 17 of 30 in the first half and then 3 for 24 in the second half from 3, and that will do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to win when you're chucking up threes and bricking them like that. But still, you should be up by 20 points in the first. If you make 17 threes in that, you're right. You should be up 20 points. And I would have live bet the Clippers had I been awake to see that unfold. But that's unbelievable. How many did Paul? I mean, who scored for the Clippers?
Paul George had 37 points, and honestly, the player of the game for the Clippers in this game, aside from Paul George, was Reggie Jackson. I wasn't so used to Mr. October. Reggie Jackson had 22 points, 8 of 15. But I feel like I don't know what his fourth quarter stats were, but it felt like he hit some ridiculous shots in that fourth. After the Jazz got to within like 2 or 3, Reggie Jackson just came up with big shot in that fourth quarter, and obviously Paul George had the best game of his Clipper career. But Clippers once again 1 win away from the conference finals. We saw the same movie last year. I think they'll close it out, but what the hell do I know? I think Kawhi Leonard's done for the series. But I'm in no position to say that the series is over. And by the way, the Clippers winning last night, if you told me before the game they would have won after the Kawhi news, I wouldn't have been surprised. That's just a case of where everyone and their mother is just betting on the Jazz. I think there's no way the Jazz lose the game, and it turns out the opposite. I feel like I've seen a ton of NBA games this year where just because someone's hurt, you bet the other side and the other team ends up winning. And especially with the Clippers too. There have been games this year where like Kawhi and Paul George don't play and they beat like a really, really good team. Like it's happened this year multiple times. It's really bizarre. And there's really no like rhyme or reason for it. I guess guys they step the hell up when they realize that Kawhi Leonard's not there.
They have a weird collection of talent, and they had 6 guys shoot 40% from free this year. So when you bomb away from deep that often and connect at that frequency, you have the ability to beat teams, which is why when you make 17 threes in the first half, you should be up by quite a lot heading into the second half, and that wasn't the case. I've been on and off this Clippers bandwagon the whole time, Frank. I actually don't know where I am on the bandwagon. I don't know if I was off after the last podcast or back on, but I'm going to stay out of this and just continue to root for and against the Clippers simultaneously because whatever I'm doing seems to be working for them. So let's go Clips. I hope you lose.
I don't know what's going to happen with the Clippers. You tell me that they lose, that they win in Game 6. I think, yep, they went at home, they close it out, they collapse again. I can see it too. I have no idea what's in store for them. But if they don't have Kawhi, I think the Jazz got a great shot here. The thing with the, I mean, listen, Donovan Mitchell, as great as he was in the first 5 games of the series, he just didn't bring it last night. He had 21 points, 6 of 19 from the field. And if the Jazz are gonna win, Donovan Mitchell needs to be, one of the best players in the NBA, Donovan Mitchell. You can't have this game where he's 6. If he's going less than 50% from the field, the Jazz they don't have enough firepower to make up for Donovan Mitchell not being the focal point of that offense. And he just didn't have it last night compared to what he had earlier in this series.
Is there a worse home court advantage than the Staples Center for the Clippers?
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
So I'm just throwing out that. Unlike Milwaukee, which I think is going to be wild tonight, I don't think the Staples Center will be wild for Game 6. So the last series here, Chris Paul, or series is over, but Chris Paul with COVID, Frank, is he the most cursed athlete ever?
Well, I think he'll be back. He's vaccinated. I think he'll be back for at least Game 1. If not Game 1, then Game 2 of that series. If he's out for like 2 weeks, man, then he's cursed. But I think that he'll probably like turn a negative test, 2 negative tests like in the next like couple days, and then he'll be fine. If he doesn't play games, if he's not right back and ready to go by Game 2, I'll be shocked. But what the hell do I know? Real quick before we go. So baseball, Major League Baseball is so incompetent. I don't even get me started on how incompetent they are. They instituted this new rule where they're getting rid of sticky stuff. And Mike, I'm just going to show you something real quick because even I can figure this out. So Tyler Glasnow, pitcher for the Rays, who throws gas, one of the best pitchers in baseball, partially torn UCL. And one of the things he talked about after getting hurt was...
It was a great speech. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to the whole 4-minute, not speech, but listen to the whole 4-minute answer because it was a fantastic explanation, which I know you're going to get into, but listen to Glasnow as well.
So Glasnow talked about how because of the baseball getting heat, so he said he used rosin, a combination of rosin and which is like a powder and sunscreen to create like a substance is the right word, a formula to like get a better grip on the ball and get a higher spin rate. Not really like there were things that break the rules. That's like, come on, either way. So the Glasnow's main point was, since with that substance, he was able to throw free and easy, but now without those substances, he's got to grip the ball a lot tighter. And the harder you grip a baseball, the harder you throw it, the more torque that friction that creates right in that elbow area. So the harder you grip a baseball, the more torque and the more pressure that puts on your elbow, and the risk for injury goes exponentially higher just from having to grip the baseball harder to make up for the grip that you missed without having your substance. And even like, just try holding a baseball. Do it yourself. Having to grip the baseball harder and tighter creates so much more stress on your elbow. It's absurd. It's like a complete 180 from what it normally is. And Rob Manfred is so freaking clueless. I can't believe it. The amount of injuries that we're going to see in Major League Baseball now for pitchers and their elbows. And you already see Jacob deGrom getting hurt. Second straight start, he's had to leave early. Tyler Glasnow goes down. I'm terrified something's going to happen to Garrett Cole now. This is going to create such a I don't know, but I think it's going to create a wildstorm of injuries because you're asking pitchers who are trained over the offseason to pitch a certain way. Now, hey, guess what? That way you're used to throwing is gone now. You have to change, and you have to grip the baseball so much tighter, and it's going to create such an uptick in injuries. Man, I am so terrified for the game of baseball.
Well, it's not even pitching. If you grip anything harder, make a fist, you can feel your forearm muscles tighten, as opposed to when you're holding something loosely. If you're not used to that, it's going to cause pain and discomfort. I did a workout with a high school football team today because I'm an idiot. And I'm sure there are muscles that I worked out today that I don't usually work out, that tomorrow I'm going to wake up having pain in places I didn't know existed. It just comes when you change up something that you're not accustomed to. And Major League Baseball, if they want to get rid of sticky stuff, I'm all for it. But I think Glasnow's point was spot on.
Glasnow was not even using sticky stuff. He was using rosin and sunscreen.
Which is still sticky stuff. But I'm saying,
sticky stuff is like
spider tack.
Spider tack is like, that's like really, really high level stuff that like, not like high level, but like it's really, really sticky. And that is, I do think spider tack is probably like, it's a little excessive.
Crossing the line, yeah.
But like a combination of rosin and sunscreen just to get a little firmer grip on the ball is not out of line by any means. And yeah.
And whatever, I'm just saying, whatever the substance is, if MLB wants to eliminate all of it, don't do it mid-season. I think that's It's the bigger point than eliminating sticky stuff is having players change what they've been doing for 4 months now, leading back to spring training, to change it up mid-season and make them go live without being, able to practice and adapt and make the necessary adjustment is stupid. You don't change rules in the middle of the season. It's like in the middle of a pickup game. All right, me and you were playing one-on-one, Frank, and we're going to 11, and at 7-3, and I graciously let you score 3 points. We are going to start playing by 2s and 3s. No, you started playing 1s and 2s. We're going to finish playing 1s and 2s. If you start something, you are obliged to finish it that way, unless it's catastrophically detrimental to the game, which I do not believe people using sticky stuff has been. I agree with Glass now. I agree with all the pitchers coming out and saying this is going to end up being a catastrophe for our health and our long-term future. And what would Major League Baseball rather have? Guys using some form of sticky stuff this year, or start the season next year with 8 of their top 12 pitchers on the IL with UCL injuries and all these different type of injuries that come as a direct result of them having to change their formula and their rotation and their pregame stuff? Because of all the sports, Frank, is there a more consistent routine sport than baseball?
So I bet you, in terms of repetition, no. I mean,
but I bet you Jacob deGrom, every day he goes to the ballpark, does the same thing. On days he starts, he goes in at the same time, does the same stuff on start days, does the same stuff. Baseball's routine. That's why when you shoot baseball, you could get wide, close cut-ups, because before each at-bat, Manny Machado, tap, tap, put up. It does the same thing. It's a routine sport. When you change someone's routine at the highest level of athletics, it leads to unintended consequences. I don't think Major League Baseball is trying to hurt these guys, but that is a direct consequence of changing what they do routinely for the last 4 months.
They're so tone deaf. It's really unbelievable. The fact that they care about this, but they didn't care about steroids. They didn't care about illegal sign stealing. They don't care about the pathetic extra inning rule, but they care about pitchers getting a little firmer grip on the ball. It's just, man, like, where are your priorities at? And listen, it's so easy to be. And listen, Rob Manfred works for the owners, and it's crazy how, like, commissioners in sports just don't seem to get it. Whether it's Goodell, whether it's Manfred, whether it's Gary Bettman, who seems to be, like, getting back on track here. Gary Bettman had a long stretch where he was completely clueless, but now that NHL's getting back on ESPN, getting a much bigger platform, getting Wayne Gretzky back in the fold. The winter process has been a huge success. The NHL's moving in the right direction. Now Major League Baseball is in the running for the most incompetence, and it's all because of Rob Manfred. Way to go. I hope you're happy, Rob. You're really, really making your mark on this game. And you know what's going to happen? He's going to end up in the freaking Hall of Fame just because he was a commissioner of baseball, just like Bud Selig. But either way, it's so dumb. Mike Ford signed was traded to the Rays today. Now he'll end up in the Baseball Hall of Fame right alongside Rob Manfred.
I have an idea. They should hang Manfred's bust on the wall with the spider tag.
We'll see how this plays out. But yeah, Mike Ford's now a Tampa Bay Ray, and he'll end up in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And this pack will be right next to Rob Manfred's. Yankees have won 2 straight against the Blue Jays, back-to-back 1-run games. I don't know how Aroldis Chapman got that 9th inning last night. Second and third, nobody out. Didn't give up a run. It was for whatever reason, like, I swear, I sensed that he was gonna get out of it. I'm like psychic. I can feel these things. I just knew he was gonna get out of it, and he did. But the Yankees won. They won 2 in a row. They're now 7 games back of the Rays, and don't look out. The Rays haven't won since Glasnow's gone down. The Yankees, 2 gritty wins over a really, really tough Blue Jays team, and I was completely out. Now I'm like,
you're halfway in. You're halfway in, halfway out. So your foot's in the door. Your foot's in the door.
We'll see where we're at next week. Hopefully, we're previewing and talking about the Nets and the. I can't imagine it's the Hawks, but hopefully, we'll be talking about the Nets against somebody in the Eastern Conference Finals. Otherwise, I will be very, very unhappy. That'll do it for this edition of the Lucas Lucas Podcast. Me at Lucas Frankel, him at Kaz Lucas. See everybody next week.